The next state to pass laws to regulate the practice of wholesaling real estate is Pennsylvania, and as far as I'm concerned, traditional wholesaling is all but dead in Pennsylvania with this new law. Now in this video, find out why. Known as Senate Bill 1173, this bill was introduced and aggressively pushed through both the House and the Senate and is just waiting for the governor to sign to become law any day now. Once signed, it goes into effect 6 months later, so probably around the beginning of 2025. So what exactly is this new law? Well, similar to what several other states have done, Pennsylvania first defines wholesaling, then mandates you become licensed to engage in wholesaling, and then also requires specific written disclosures to inform and apparently protect sellers from wholesalers. And honestly, that's all fine. We can deal with that if that's all Pennsylvania required. We could adjust and keep going, but no licensing and disclosure isn't enough. Unlike other states, Pennsylvania took regulation to a whole new level, which will now make traditional wholesaling extremely difficult, and in my opinion, it might not be worth the risk or effort. In the name of protecting the consumer, this new law gives sellers a non-waivable right to cancel a contract for any reason at all for up to 30 days or until closing, whichever happens first. In other words, your contract with the seller is worthless. This is insane. Now I'm going to explain why this is so detrimental, so keep watching. But first, let's start at the top and explain this new law in its entirety. SB 1173 is an amendment to the existing Real Estate Licensing and Registration Act under the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission, or REC for short. Now the REC exists in every state to protect the consumer in the residential buying and selling process. Now, similar to several other states, Pennsylvania expanded the definition of brokering to include wholesaling. And in case you didn't know, brokering is when you assist others in the process of buying or selling residential real estate for a fee. Now, why is that significant? It's significant because the practice of brokering is highly regulated and falls under the jurisdiction and oversight of the REC. That means anyone involved in brokering, as defined by the REC, must be licensed and adhere to all of the rules and regulations set forth by the REC. Not complying could result in fines, penalties, and even jail. So it's a big deal. So with this new law, first and foremost, the Pennsylvania REC now includes wholesaling under the umbrella of brokering activities. That means that you now must hold an active real estate license to wholesale. And let me be clear, this is not like Oklahoma, Nebraska, and a few other states where wholesaling is only considered brokering when you market a contract for sale. Pennsylvania took the same stance as Illinois and Virginia, that the very act of wholesaling is brokering and requires a license. So the next question should be, what does the REC consider wholesaling? Good question. Luckily for you, they include the definition of a wholesale transaction. It says the purchase of an equitable interest or other interest in residential property with the intent to assign, sell, or otherwise transfer the interest for a fee, commission, or other valuable monetary consideration without having taken title as the owner of record of the interest. Now, words matter, and many of these laws are written very poorly and are intentionally vague so that the REC can interpret and enforce them how they see fit. But let's dissect the written words so we can have some visibility and hopefully gain some clarity. First, it says the purchase of an equitable interest. So what is equitable interest? That would be your rights to a contract. When you execute a purchase and sale agreement with a seller, you hold an equitable interest as the buyer of contract. Next, it says with the intent to assign, sell, or transfer that interest. Now, intent is an interesting word to use because how do you measure someone's intentions? I mean, couldn't you say, I never intended on wholesaling the property when I contracted with the seller, but then later at the last minute I changed my mind and wholesaled it. Well, in law, the interpretation of intent is usually determined by your past actions and your history of behavior. For example, if you make a living wholesaling full-time and you average 5 wholesale transactions per month, then your intentions or history of behavior is pretty obvious to wholesale properties. Likewise, let's say that you're a doctor and you own some rentals and you have never wholesaled a property before, and after contracting with a seller, you later decided to assign your contract to your brother. Well, in that case, you could argue that since you don't have a history of wholesaling, your intent was not to wholesale it. Okay, going back to the definition of wholesaling, it says when you purchase an equitable interest with the intent to assign, sell, or transfer that interest. So let's stop there. This clearly includes assignments, but what about double closings? A double closing is when you resell the property to a new buyer immediately after contracting with a seller, and you line up both the closing between you and the seller and you and the buyer so that they happen back to back. Now, double closings might be a gray area because technically you're not selling your interest, you're selling the property. Now, the problem with double closings is you need financing known as transactional funding. Now, in time, we'll see how the REC handles double closings, but if permissible, I provide 100% funding to my students for double closings. Now, to learn how to get your first double closing funded for free, go to usejerryscash.com. Now, going back to our definition, the purchase of an equitable interest with the intent to assign, sell, or transfer your interest for a fee, and then this part is key, without having taken title as the owner of record. So really, any method where you're making money in a transaction where you don't yet own the property. Okay, next, let's discuss the disclosures with this new law. In addition to being licensed, the REC also wants you to make it crystal clear to sellers that you are a wholesaler. Now, this new law has 4 mandatory statements that must be prominently visible to the seller in writing. First, a statement that says, you intend to assign, sell, or transfer your equitable interest for a fee before taking title as the owner of record. Second, the seller must be made aware that he has the right to obtain an appraisal from a certified appraiser or from a third-party real estate broker. Third, and this is a big one, a statement that the seller has the right to cancel the contract for up to 30 days or until conveyance, whichever occurs first. More on that in a minute. And fourth, a statement that within 10 business days after the notice of cancellation, all payment of any kind made by the seller must be refunded. Okay, now let's talk about the right to cancel. It says a consumer has the right to cancel the agreement or contract until midnight of the 30th day after the date when the consumer executed the agreement or contract, or until conveyance, whichever occurs first. So according to Pennsylvania, even with a license and proper disclosure, a seller has a full 30 days to cancel the contract for whatever reason. And by the way, it also says that if you don't provide the proper disclosures, the seller can cancel at any time, even after 30 days. And just so you know, the seller's right to cancel the contract cannot be waived. Now, this is crazy. This is unbelievable. You could sign a contract with a seller, and on day 29, the seller could change his mind and cancel the contract for whatever reason he wants with no repercussions. That means a fully executed, legally binding purchase and sale contract is worth less than used toilet paper. In fact, after signing a contract with a seller, you might as well stop by Taco Bell on your way home, eat a bean burrito, then 15 minutes later when you get home, take a crap and then wipe your ass with your executed contract, because that's how worthless it is. How can you pass a law that makes a contract non-binding by the seller? How can you pass a law that gives the seller an unwaivable right to cancel a contract without cause and for any reason? Now, that validates the very nature and purpose of a contract. Do you realize how many problems this is going to cause? What about opening escrow with title and then the seller cancels? What about other wholesalers going behind your back and offering more money to the seller? What's to stop the seller and your cash buyer from cutting you out of the deal? Think about it. You contract with a seller for, let's say, $100,000 with a 30-day closing. Then you contact the cash buyer and you offer the deal to him for $115,000 on assignment, which normally would be a great deal. But instead, the cash buyer goes around you directly to the seller and offers the seller $107,500. And to make more money, the seller simply cancels your contract without any reason at all whatsoever and recontracts with your cash buyer for $107,500. In that scenario, by cutting out the wholesaler, the seller makes $7,500 more on the deal, and the cash buyer saves $7,500 on the deal, all at the expense of the wholesaler who spent the time, energy, and effort and expense to find and negotiate the deal. That wholesaler gets screwed. What wholesaler in their right mind is going to take that risk in Pennsylvania? Now, this is actually not that surprising to me. There is a pervasive and destructive narrative in the real estate industry that wholesaling is predatory and harmful to sellers. Just take a look at how this bill even came about. The 2 sponsors of this bill are Pat Stefano and Greg Rothman, who both publicly expressed their disdain for wholesalers. Senator Rothman said, "Wholesaling has become prevalent in recent years. often at the expense of the most vulnerable. Senator Stefano said, wholesalers trick sellers into selling their homes at a price significantly below fair market value, where the wholesaler stands to make substantial profits. You want to know why we have this law? Apparently, to protect vulnerable homeowners from being tricked into selling their homes significantly below market value. Now, I can't think of a grosser misrepresentation and misunderstanding of wholesaling than that. And who is leading the charge to stop wholesaling? You guessed it, the National Association of Realtors, or NAR for short. Now, according to the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, this bill was a top priority, and the passing of this law was the culmination of efforts put out by a committee of its members called the Wholesaling Task Force. When the bill was voted on in the House on June 5th, nearly 250 realtors showed up at the Capitol advocating for the passage of SB 1173 and to thank Pennsylvania senators for their support of this bill. And I'm just curious, where were the Pennsylvania wholesalers while this was going on? I wonder if there was a task force of wholesalers fighting for our industry. Nope. Did 250 wholesalers go to the Capitol to oppose this bill? Nope. We got nothing. Now, I've been screaming from the rooftops for years that regulation is sweeping across America, and it's not just going to make it harder to wholesale, but they are coming after blood. They want to stop wholesaling entirely. Now, this is really sad to me because the truth is, by and large, wholesalers provide a tremendous service to distressed sellers that no one else is able or willing to provide, especially real estate agents. What NAR, the REC, state legislators, and all these anti-wholesalers don't understand is that wholesalers play a vital role in the housing economy. Many of these homes are vacant and dilapidated. Wholesalers bring much needed inventory to investors who in turn fix up these homes, improving neighborhoods, reducing crime, increasing values, and providing affordable housing. Nobody wins when you take the wholesaler out of the picture. So what should you do about it? Normally, I would say step up your game, get your real estate license, follow disclosures, and keep going as an option. But with this law that sellers can cancel contracts for any reason, I'm not going to attempt traditional wholesaling. Instead, I'll be doing what I call the takedown method. I've been talking about this quite a bit and will continue to talk about it. The takedown method is where you get funding, buy the property directly from the seller, trash it out and clean it, and then resell it on the open market. Not only do you avoid all these issues with regulation doing the takedown method, if you do it right, you typically make 2 to 4 times more than traditional wholesaling. And I did an entire series where I break it down step by step. I'll put the playlist link in the description below for you. I also created an entire library of resources to help you get your first takedown deal that I'll give to you for free. Just go to freetakedownkit.com to get the free download. And to show you just how powerful the takedown method is, watch this next video where I show a recent deal where I doubled what I would have made wholesaling and made $120,000 net profit. Watch that now, and I'll see you on the next video.